My own daughter and her husband left me on a dark, empty road in the middle of the night and drove away like I was nothing. That's the part people don't believe when I tell them. They look at me, white hair, soft cardigan, trembling hands, and they think I must be exaggerating. Honey, I wish I was. It was 1:17 a.m. I remember the time because I checked the dashboard clock when my daughter, Melissa, said, "Mom, we just need to make a quick stop." Her voice was tight, sugar-coated, the way it gets when she's trying to sound patient but isn't. I had been living with Melissa and her husband, Greg, for almost a year. After I sold my house in Ohio and moved to Texas to be closer to them, they insisted it would be temporary. Just until I got back on my feet. Funny thing is, I never felt off my feet until I moved into their house. That night, they said we were going for a drive because I needed fresh air. Greg had been complaining all evening about how I left the kitchen light on. Melissa kept sighing every time I asked a question. I felt like a guest in a house I helped furnish. Half the down payment had come from my savings, but somehow, I was the burden. We drove farther than I expected. Past the gas stations. Past the strip malls. Past the last flickering streetlight. Where are we going? I asked. Mom, please, Melissa snapped. Just relax. Relax. That word. Like I was the problem. Then Greg slowed the car. We were on a long deserted stretch of road outside town. No houses. No stores. Just fields and darkness swallowing the headlights. Greg put the car in park. Melissa turned to me, her face cold in the dim glow of the dashboard. Mom, she said. We can't do this anymore. I laughed nervously. Do what, sweetheart? This. Taking care of you. It's too much. You're always confused, always needing something. We need space. I felt my chest tighten. I can stay in my room more. I won't bother you. Greg got out of the car. My stomach dropped. Melissa opened my door from the inside. We packed your suitcase, she said, pointing to the trunk. Packed. My voice shook. Melissa, it's the middle of the night. You'll be fine. There's a motel about a mile back. A mile. In the dark. On that empty road. Before I could fully understand what was happening, Greg pulled my suitcase out and set it on the gravel. The cold air hit my face like a slap. Melissa, I begged, my voice cracking. I'm your mother. She didn't look at me. Get out, Mom. I stepped onto the road because my legs felt too weak to fight. The gravel shifted under my slippers. And then, they got back in the car. I thought, surely they would roll the window down. Surely she would say this was a lesson. A scare. A joke gone too far. Instead, the engine roared. The red taillights glowed for a moment. Then they disappeared into the dark. I stood there alone. I have never felt fear like that. Not when my husband died. Not when I had surgery at 68. This was different. This was abandonment. The wind moved through the fields, making a whispering sound that felt almost human. I wrapped my arms around myself and started crying. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just the quiet, broken kind of crying that comes when your own child throws you away. I kept thinking, this can't be real. My daughter would never do this. But she did. I tried to pull my suitcase, but the wheels stuck in the gravel. My hands shook so badly I had to stop every few steps. Every pair of headlights in the distance made my heart race. What if someone dangerous stopped? What if no one stopped? I felt small, helpless, disposable. And that's when something shifted inside me. Standing on that dark American highway, with tears on my face and gravel in my slippers, I realized something powerful. They thought I was weak. They thought I had nowhere to go. They thought I would beg to come back. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Because the woman they left on that road wasn't just a confused old grandma. She was the original owner of that house. She was the one who still controlled the trust. And she was about to teach her daughter and son-in-law a lesson they would never forget. But first, I had to survive that night. When your own child leaves you on a deserted road at 1:17 in the morning, something inside you either shatters or hardens. Mine hardened. I stood there for what felt like hours, but it was probably 15 minutes. The wind kept tugging at my cardigan, and my suitcase wheels refused to cooperate on the gravel shoulder. My slippers were not made for survival, honey. They were made for warm kitchens and quiet mornings. Every sound felt magnified. A rustle in the field. A distant engine. My own uneven breathing. I kept replaying Melissa's face in my mind. Not angry. Not hysterical. Just done. Like she was canceling a subscription she no longer wanted. That hurt more than the cold. Finally, I forced myself to move. If there really was a motel a mile back, I had to reach it. I dragged the suitcase behind me, the wheels scraping loudly against the pavement once I reached the road itself. 1 mile doesn't sound far when you're in a car. At 72, on a dark highway, it feels endless. Twice, cars sped past without slowing. The headlights blinded me, and I stepped closer to the edge of the road, terrified of being hit. My legs trembled with every step. I hadn't walked that far in years, but I kept going. Because humiliation is powerful fuel. After what felt like forever, I saw it, a flickering neon sign up ahead. Sunsetting. Half the letters were burned out, but it looked like heaven to me. I almost laughed. Almost. The parking lot was mostly empty. A single pickup truck near the entrance. I pulled my suitcase up the cracked concrete steps and pushed the office door open. A bell jingled. Behind the counter sat a young man in his 20s. Earbuds in, scrolling on his phone. He looked up, startled, when he saw me. Mom? You okay? I must have looked like a ghost. Hair windblown. Face streaked with tears. Slippers dirty. I need a room, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Just for the night. He hesitated. Do you have ID? Of course I did. I may have been discarded, but I wasn't foolish. I pulled my purse closer and handed it over. While he typed into the computer, he glanced at me again. It's kinda late to be out, huh? I gave a small, tight smile. My daughter dropped me off. The words tasted bitter. He frowned slightly but didn't press. Room 12. First floor. Breakfast is at 7. Coffee's always on. Coffee. Bless him. When I stepped into that motel room, it smelled faintly of cleaning spray and old carpet. The bedspread was outdated. The lamp buzzed softly, but it was safe. I locked the door. Then I locked it again. And that's when the tears came properly. I sat on the edge of that bed and cried like I hadn't cried in decades. Not just for being left on the road, but for all the little moments leading up to it. The comments about me forgetting things. The way Melissa would sigh when I asked about bills. The way Greg took over conversations about the house, like it was entirely his. The house. That thought snapped me upright. Because here's what they forgot. The house was still in my name. When my husband passed, I sold our old place and used most of the money to help Melissa and Greg buy theirs. They couldn't qualify for the mortgage alone at the time, so I put it under my name. We agreed it was temporary, until they refinanced. They never did. Instead, they slowly made me feel like a guest in a home legally tied to me. And tonight, they left the legal owner of that house on a roadside like unwanted luggage. Of the irony. I stopped crying. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Melissa had sent one message. Text me when you get somewhere safe. No epaleji. No, I love you. Just logistics. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my banking app. Everything was still intact. My retirement funds. The trust account. The property documents stored digitally. They had access to the house, but they did not control it. And then, like a quiet flame catching, an idea began to form. If they thought they could discard me, if they believed I had no power, then maybe it was time to remind them exactly whose name was on that deed. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to plan. Because revenge, sweetheart, is not loud. It's quiet. Legal. Precise. And I knew exactly who to call in the morning. The property management company that handled my rental units years ago. And especially my old manager. He was loyal. And he still owed me a favor. Melissa thought leaving me in the dark would end the story. She didn't realize. That night on that empty American road was just the beginning. I didn't sleep much that night at the Sunset Inn. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw red taillights fading into darkness. But by 6:30 a.m., I wasn't crying anymore. I was thinking. There's something about betrayal that clears your vision. It's like wiping fog off a mirror. You finally see what's been standing in front of you all along. I made myself a cup of that watery motel coffee and sat at the tiny round table by the window. The Texas sun was rising, warm and golden, like nothing ugly had happened in the world. But something had. And I was done pretending it hadn't. I opened my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in years. Daniel Harper. Daniel had been my property manager when my husband and I owned 3 small rental properties in Ohio. Reliable. Sharp. Loyal to a fault. When we sold those properties after my husband passed, Daniel moved south and started working with a larger real estate firm. The last I heard, he was managing residential contracts in this state. And more importantly, he understood paperwork. I took a deep breath and hit call. He answered on the 3rd ring. Harper Property Group. There was a pause. Then, Mrs. Reynolds? Ah, hearing my proper name again. Not Mom. Not Grandma. Not are you sure you remember? Just Mrs. Reynolds. Yes, Daniel. It's me. Well, I'll be, ma'am. It's been years. Are you all right? I let a small silence stretch between us. No, I said calmly. I'm not. And I need your professional help. His tone shifted immediately. Business. Focused. Respectful. What's going on? So I told him. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Just facts. I explained how I co-signed and legally held the mortgage for Melissa and Greg's house. How they were supposed to refinance within 2 years. How it had been almost 5. How the house was still fully under my name. And then I told him what they did last night. He didn't interrupt. But when I finished, his voice was different. Controlled anger. They left you on the side of the road? Yes. At night? Yes. A long exhale. Mrs. Reynolds, are you safe right now? I'm at a motel. There was a short silence. Then he said something that steadied me more than he knew. All right. Here's what we're going to do. We. Not you. Not maybe. We. He explained it clearly. Because the property was still legally mine, and they were technically residing there without a formal rental contract, they had no tenant protections. No lease. No ownership stake. In the eyes of the law, they were occupants. Not owners. And you never transferred the deed? He asked. Never. And there's no written agreement promising ownership? No. Another pause. Then legally, ma'am, you can revoke access. My heart beat a little faster. You mean? I mean you can remove them from the property. The words felt surreal. My own daughter. Removed. I stared out the motel window at the empty parking lot. Daniel. I said quietly, if I do this, I'm ending something forever. His voice softened just slightly. With respect, Mrs. Reynolds, it sounds like they already did. That hit hard. But he wasn't wrong. We discussed steps. First, I would come to his office and sign temporary management authority paperwork. That would allow his firm to act on my behalf regarding the property. Second, he would serve formal notice, legal, documented, giving them a deadline to vacate. Third, locks would be changed. Clean. Lawful. Final. And if they resist? I asked. Then we proceed through eviction channels. But given the situation, I suspect they won't want this dragged into court. Especially not after abandoning the legal homeowner on a highway. Irony really does circle back, doesn't it? I hung up and sat very still. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't begging. I wasn't the small, frightened woman dragging a suitcase down a dark road. I was the property owner. I was the account holder. I was the one with authority. Melissa had spent years subtly convincing me I was fragile. Forgetful. Dependent. But I managed properties for 15 years. I handled hospital administration after my husband's death. I survived cancer at 64. And they thought I couldn't survive one cruel night? They forgot something important. I raised Melissa. If she inherited stubbornness from anyone, it was me. I packed my things slowly that morning. Paid the motel bill. Thanked the young clerk. Then I stood outside for a moment in the sunlight. I didn't feel powerful. I felt steady. And steady is far more dangerous than angry. Melissa thought leaving me in the dark would silence me. Instead, she handed me clarity. And by the end of this week, she was going to understand exactly what that meant. By noon, I was sitting across from Daniel Harper in his office. He looked older than I remembered, more gray at the temples, but his eyes were the same. Sharp, observant, loyal. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said carefully, sliding the property file toward me. "I've reviewed everything. The deed is clean. The mortgage is in your name only. They've been making payments into your account, but legally, this house is yours." Hearing that out loud did something to me. For months, no years, I had been made to feel like a tolerated guest. Like I should be grateful they let me live there. And all along, I own the place. Daniel pushed a document toward me. "This gives our firm temporary authority to manage the property on your behalf." My hand didn't tremble when I picked up the pen. Not once. I signed. Slow, clear, legible. Each stroke of my name felt like reclaiming something stolen quietly over time. Daniel nodded. "All right. I'll draft the notice immediately." "What will it say?" I asked. His voice was calm, professional. "Formal occupancy termination. 72 hours to vacate voluntarily. After that, we proceed legally." 72 hours. 3 days. That was more mercy than they gave me. We drove together. I insisted. I wanted to see it. When we pulled into the driveway of that house, my chest tightened, but not from fear. From recognition. The hydrangeas I planted last spring were blooming along the walkway. The porch light, left on in the daytime, as usual, glowed unnecessarily. My home. Daniel carried the envelope. I stayed a step behind him. The front door opened before he could knock. Melissa stood there. She looked startled to see me. More startled to see I wasn't alone. "Mom," she said, blinking rapidly. "What's going on?" Her tone wasn't apologetic. It was irritated. Greg appeared behind her, arms crossed. Daniel stepped forward politely. "Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Harper. I represent the legal property owner of this residence." Greg frowned. And Daniel held up the envelope. "Mrs. Reynolds has chosen to terminate your occupancy. This is formal notice. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises." Silence. Thick. Heavy. Melissa stared at me like she didn't understand the language being spoken. "Mom," she laughed nervously, "what is this? Some kind of joke?" I met her eyes. "No." Greg stepped forward. "You can't just throw us out. This is our house." I tilted my head slightly. "No," I said evenly. "It's mine." Melissa's face went pale. "That's not fair," she whispered. "Not fair." The irony almost made me smile. "You left me on the side of a highway at 1 in the morning, I said calmly. "Fair stopped being part of this conversation then." Her mouth opened. Closed. "Mom, we were overwhelmed." "So was I," I replied softly. "But I didn't abandon my child in the dark." That hit. I saw it. Greg snatched the envelope from Daniel's hand and tore it open aggressively. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, scanning the page. "We've been paying the mortgage." "Yes," Daniel replied evenly. "Into Mrs. Reynolds' account. Without a lease. Without ownership transfer." Melissa's breathing grew uneven. "You're doing this to punish us," she said, her voice cracking. "You're being cruel." Cruel. That word tried to dig into me. But I didn't let it. "I asked you on that road if I could just stay in my room and not bother you," I reminded her quietly. "You told me to get out." The wind moved through the trees. For a moment no one spoke. Daniel cleared his throat gently. 72 hours. If you need assistance with relocation resources, our office can provide referrals." Melissa looked at me again. Not with irritation now. With fear. "Where are we supposed to go?" she whispered. The same question I asked at 1:17 a.m. I didn't answer. Because sometimes silence is the only mirror someone needs. Daniel stepped back toward the car. I followed. As we walked down the driveway, Melissa called after me. "Mom, you're really choosing this over us?" I paused. Turned. "No," I said. "I'm choosing myself. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. But what they didn't know, what Melissa and Greg still hadn't figured out, was that removing them from the house was only step one. Because I hadn't forgotten the humiliation. I hadn't forgotten the cold road. And I hadn't forgotten how small they thought I was. If they believed the notice on the door was the end of it, they were about to learn. It was only the beginning. The first night after the notice was served, I didn't go back to the motel. I checked into a proper hotel downtown. Clean lobby. Security cameras. Real locks. I was done sleeping in places that felt temporary. Daniel insisted on upgrading the room himself. Mrs. Reynolds, he said firmly, you're not hiding. You're repositioning. I liked that word. Repositioning. Melissa called 14 times that evening. I let it ring. Then came the voicemails. At first she sounded angry. Mom, this is insane. Call me back. Then defensive. You're blowing this out of proportion. Then desperate. Please, we can talk about this. We could have talked on that road too. Greg didn't call. That told me everything I needed to know about who was really calculating in that house. By the second day, Daniel informed me they had contacted a lawyer. That's fine, he said calmly. Their position is weak. Very weak. Weak. The same word they used for me. Funny how things turn around. I spent that afternoon reviewing old bank records Daniel had pulled. Something had been bothering me, not just the abandonment but the months leading up to it. Small transfers. Minor withdrawals labeled household adjustments. Nothing dramatic. But consistent. I pointed it out to Daniel. He adjusted his glasses and leaned closer. These are automated transfers, he said. Authorized under your main account. I never approved those. He looked at me carefully. Then someone used your digital access. The room felt colder. Melissa had helped me organize my online banking last year. She insisted I needed things simplified. Simplified. Daniel's voice lowered. We can file a financial misuse complaint. I nodded slowly. Do it. Because this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about control. That evening, I drove past the house. Not to go inside. Just to see. The curtains were half open. Boxes were stacked near the door. They were packing. Good. But as I watched from across the street, I saw something that made my stomach tighten. Greg was arguing on the porch. Not with Melissa. With someone else. A uniformed officer. Daniel must have anticipated resistance and arranged a courtesy patrol check. Greg gestured angrily toward the driveway. Melissa stood behind him crying. The officer didn't look sympathetic. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt balance. On the third morning, exactly 72 hours later, Daniel called me at 8:02 a.m. They're still inside. Of course they were. They're claiming they need more time, he added. I inhaled slowly. No. Daniel didn't hesitate. Understood. By noon, a formal eviction filing was submitted electronically, and by 3:45 p.m., 2 officers arrived to oversee the lawful removal. I did not go. I didn't need to. Daniel called me during it. They're packing faster now, he said dryly. There was shouting in the background. Melissa's voice carried faintly through the phone. Mom, please. Just talk to me. I closed my eyes. Talk. The word almost made me laugh. After everything, now she wanted to talk. Daniel's voice returned steady and professional. They'll be out within the hour. And just like that, the people who left me on a roadside were being escorted out of a house they never legally owned. By 5:10 p.m., Daniel sent me a photo. The porch. Empty. Keys placed neatly on the railing. Locks already changed. I stared at the image for a long time. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt final. Melissa sent one last text that night. You've destroyed this family. I typed back for the first time since that road. No. You did when you left me there. Then I turned my phone off. But here's the thing. Most people think that was the revenge. That kicking them out was the lesson. It wasn't. That was just accountability. The real lesson was coming next. Because when Daniel dug deeper into those financial transfers, he found something neither of them expected. And once I saw it, I realized this wasn't just about cruelty. It was premeditated, calculated. And I wasn't done yet. When Daniel said he found something, his voice didn't carry drama. It carried certainty. And certainty is far more dangerous. I was sitting in the quiet corner of the hotel lobby when he slid the printed statements across the table toward me. The paper felt heavier than it should have. These transfers, he said calmly, tapping the page, weren't random. I leaned forward. There it was. Every month, on the same date, a transfer labeled medical support adjustment. Small enough not to trigger alerts. Large enough to add up. Over 11 months? Nearly $42,000. My hands didn't shake. They went still. I never authorized that, I said evenly. Daniel nodded. Access came from your home IP address. Same device each time. Melissa's tablet. The one she insisted on setting up for me, so I wouldn't get confused. Ah. Confused. That word again. Daniel turned another page. There's more. This part hit harder. The funds weren't going toward bills. They were being moved into a separate savings account. Under Greg's name. Not joint. Silence filled the space between us. This wasn't frustration. This wasn't being overwhelmed. This was planning. Melissa hadn't just wanted me out of the house. She wanted me financially weakened first. Isolated. Dependent. And then discarded. I leaned back in the chair slowly. She thought if I didn't have money, I said softly, I wouldn't fight back. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. I closed my eyes briefly. The image of that road came back. The gravel. The wind. The suitcase. It hadn't been impulsive. It had been timed. After almost a year of draining me quietly, I opened my eyes. What are my options? Daniel didn't hesitate. We file financial exploitation of a senior adult. The words felt clinical, but powerful. And criminally? I asked. Yes. The law in this state doesn't take elder financial abuse lightly, especially when there's digital evidence. IP tracking. Transfer logs. Signature mismatch. Intent. Intent. That's what changes everything. Do it, I said calmly. No te hagas. No hesitación. Because mercy is for accidents. And this was not an accident. That afternoon, formal reports were filed. Bank fraud. Unauthorized transfers. Elder financial exploitation. Forgery review attached. By evening, Melissa's lawyer was calling Daniel nonstop. Funny how quickly things shift when evidence enters the room. At 9:13 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice came through shaky. Mom, please. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Greg was under pressure. We just needed temporary help. We were going to pay it back. Temporary. Like the house was temporary. Like leaving me on a highway was temporary. Like betrayal expires after a few days. Ah, sweetheart. No. You don't get to drain someone's savings and call it temporary. You don't forge documents and call it stress. You don't abandon your mother and call it space. And you definitely don't get forgiveness without consequence. The next morning, Daniel called early. They've frozen Greg's accounts pending investigation. Good. They're requesting mediation. Of course they were. When power slips, people suddenly want to talk. I stared out the hotel window at the city waking up below. Cars moving. People commuting. Life continuing. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger. Not vengeance. Control. Melissa thought leaving me in the dark would end my influence. Instead, it exposed hers. And now? The law was involved. The money trail was documented. The house was secured. But there was still one thing left. One conversation that needed to happen face to face. Because revenge isn't just about loss. It's about understanding. And I wasn't finished teaching that lesson. Not yet. The mediation was scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m. Neutral office building. Glass walls. Beige carpets. One of those places designed to feel calm while people's lives unravel inside it. Daniel sat beside me. My lawyer. Yes, I hired my own, not just property counsel, sat across from him. A quiet, sharp woman named Evelyn Carter. Melissa and Greg arrived together. But they didn't walk in together. Greg entered first. Shoulders stiff. Jaw tight. Trying to look composed. Melissa followed a few steps behind. No makeup. Red eyes. Hands clutching her purse like it was the last stable thing in her world. When she saw me, she froze. I held her gaze. No anger. No softness. Just presence. The mediator, a middle-aged man with a gentle voice, cleared his throat. We're here to discuss potential resolution before further legal escalation. Legal escalation? Greg shifted in his chair. Melissa avoided eye contact. Evelyn slid the documents forward calmly. $42,318 in unauthorized transfers, she said evenly. Digital logs confirm repeated access through Mrs. Reynolds' personal banking credentials without consent. Melissa's breathing grew uneven. Greg leaned forward. It wasn't unauthorized. We live in the same house. It was family money. Family money. Ah. I finally spoke. My retirement account, I said calmly, is not communal property. Silence. The mediator nodded gently. Mrs. Reynolds, what outcome are you seeking? That was the question. Not revenge. Not humiliation. Outcome. I folded my hands neatly in front of me. Full repayment, I said evenly. With interest. Greg inhaled sharply. Melissa whispered, Mom. I didn't look at her. And, I continued, a written acknowledgement of financial misconduct. Greg scoffed. You want us to admit to a crime? Evelyn responded smoothly. A civil acknowledgement prevents criminal prosecution. Otherwise we proceed. That landed. Hard. Melissa's eyes widened. Criminal, she whispered. Daniel slid another page forward. The forged clause on the power of attorney has already been flagged, he said calmly. Ink aging doesn't match. Signature tracing analysis is pending. Greg went pale. I watched it happen. The slow realization that this wasn't a family argument anymore. It was documented. Provable. Melissa's voice cracked. Mom, please. We were drowning. We had credit card debt. Greg's business was failing. We didn't know what else to do. You could have asked, I said quietly. She looked down. Because she knew. They didn't ask because asking risks refusal. Taking quietly feels safer. Until it isn't. The mediator spoke gently. If repayment terms are structured, and Mrs. Reynolds agrees not to pursue criminal charges, this can remain civil. Greg clenched his jaw. What are the terms? He muttered. Evelyn answered clearly. Immediate return of $15,000 from existing savings. Structured repayment plan for the remaining balance within 18 months. Signed confession of unauthorized transfer. Permanent relinquishment of any claim to Mrs. Reynolds' property or estate. Melissa gasped softly. Estate, she whispered. I met her eyes then. Yes. Because here's what she forgot. I had already rewritten the trust. The house. Removed from her future. My assets. Redirected. Every single thing I worked for. Now secured for Lily. Irrevocably. Melissa's voice trembled. You're cutting us out? No, I said calmly. You cut yourselves out. The room felt smaller. Greg finally broke. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. If we sign, he said stiffly, you drop everything? Yes. Evelyn added. Provided compliance is maintained. Melissa started crying. Real crying. Not defensive tears. Not manipulative ones. Grief. Loss. Consequences. Mom, she whispered. Why are you doing this? That question hung there. I answered softly. Because leaving me on that road wasn't your first step. It was your final one. Silence. Heavy. Permanent. Greg signed first. Quick. Efficient. Resigned. Melissa held the pen longer. Her hand shook. For a brief second, I saw the little girl she used to be. The one who used to hold my hand crossing the street. The one who used to cry when she scraped her knee. But adulthood is a series of choices. And she had made hers. She signed. The mediator collected the documents. It's done, he said gently. And just like that, the power shifted completely. Not because I screamed. Not because I humiliated them. But because I refused to stay small. When the meeting ended, Melissa approached me slowly. Greg stayed back. Are you ever going to forgive me? She asked quietly. I looked at her for a long moment. Forgiveness, I said softly, is different from access. She didn't understand yet, but she would. Because I was no longer the woman who shrank to keep peace. I was the woman who survived the dark road. And next, there was one final boundary I had to set. One that would make sure no one ever mistook my kindness for weakness again. After the mediation, I didn't rush home. Because that house, yes mine, was no longer just a building. It was a symbol. And symbols matter. Daniel had already arranged for a deep cleaning service. Every room cleared. Every surface disinfected. Locks replaced. Security system updated under my sole authorization. No shared passwords. No emergency spare keys. No quiet access. When I finally walked through the front door again, the air felt different. Still. Honest. For the first time in years, I wasn't entering cautiously. I wasn't wondering if my presence was inconvenient. I was home. I walked slowly from room to room. The kitchen where Melissa once laughed while baking cookies as a teenager. The living room where Greg used to talk big about future investments. The hallway where my suitcase used to sit near the coat rack the night they told me I needed space. Ah, space. I stood in my bedroom doorway for a long moment. The bed was neatly made now. Fresh sheets. Sunlight coming in through the blinds. This room had once felt like exile inside my own house. Now it felt like command. But I wasn't moving back in. Not yet. Because strength isn't just reclaiming territory. It's redefining it. That afternoon, I called Melissa. Not to argue. Not to comfort. To establish terms. She answered immediately. Mom. Her voice was smaller now. Careful. I need to make something clear, I said calmly. Silence on her end. You will not step foot on this property again without written invitation. A sharp inhale. Not for holidays? She asked softly. Not for anything. She started to cry again. But I didn't soften. Boundaries are not punishment, I said evenly. They are protection. For who? She whispered. For me. The line stayed quiet. Then she said something I didn't expect. I didn't think you'd actually fight back. There it was. The truth. They thought I'd cry. They thought I'd beg. They thought I'd forgive quickly because I'm a mother. But motherhood does not cancel self-respect. I didn't think you'd leave me on a highway, I replied calmly. Silence. Then a broken whisper. I'm sorry. Not defensive. Not rushed. Real. I closed my eyes for a moment. Because here's the complicated part about revenge. It satisfies justice. But it doesn't erase hurt. I accept your apology, I said softly. She gasped quietly, like she hadn't expected that. But accepting it does not restore what you broke. Another silence. Longer this time. I understand, she said finally. And for the first time in this entire storm, I believed her. We ended the call gently. No yelling. No drama. Just truth. That evening, I sat alone in the living room with a cup of tea. The house felt peaceful. But it also felt bigger. Because I wasn't filling it with tension anymore. Daniel stopped by briefly to drop off final paperwork. Everything's secured, he assured me. Financial repayments start next month. I nodded. And Mrs. Reynolds, he added carefully. You handled this with more composure than most people half your age. I smiled faintly. It's amazing what clarity does. After he left, I walked to the front porch. The same porch Melissa stood on when she begged for more time. The same driveway Greg argued on. The same walkway I planted flowers along. The wind moved gently through the trees. Not harsh like that night on the road. Soft. Calm. But here's what nobody tells you about revenge. The real power isn't in taking something away. It's in proving you were never powerless. Melissa and Greg lost access. They lost money. They lost comfort. But what they truly lost was the illusion that I was weak. And there was still one final piece left to close this chapter. Because forgiveness may not restore access. But legacy? Legacy is earned. And I had already decided exactly who would inherit mine. A week after the mediation, I met with my estate attorney. Not to react. To finalize. Because here's something most people don't understand about betrayal. It doesn't just change your present. It rewrites your future. We sat in a quiet office lined with dark wooden shelves and leather-bound law books. My attorney, Ms. Carter, placed the revised trust documents in front of me. Once this is signed, she said calmly, the terms are permanent unless you personally amend them. Permanent. I liked the weight of that word. For years, Melissa assumed she would inherit everything. The house. My savings. The investment portfolio her father and I built brick by brick over decades. It wasn't entitlement spoken out loud. It was entitlement assumed. That assumption cost her. I'd like to review the final distribution again, I said. Ms. Carter nodded. The house would be placed into an educational and housing trust for Lily, my granddaughter. Funds released in stages. College tuition first, then a down payment on her own home someday. Not rented. Not co-signed. Owned. My retirement investments would partially fund that trust. A portion would be donated annually to a local senior advocacy organization that supports victims of financial exploitation. And Melissa? She was not erased. But she was no longer primary. She would receive a modest, fixed sum. Nothing more. No control. No oversight. No executive. That role now belonged to a neutral third-party trustee. Because access without accountability had already proven dangerous. Are you certain? Ms. Carter asked gently. Yes, I said without hesitation. Because this wasn't anger. This was alignment. I signed every page slowly, deliberately. When the final document was notarized, something inside me settled. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was protection. Later that afternoon, Melissa texted. Can we talk? I agreed to meet at a quiet cafe. Public. Neutral. Safe. She looked thinner. Tired. Greg wasn't with her. She sat across from me and didn't touch her coffee. Are you changing the will? She asked directly. Word travels fast when lawyers are involved. Yes, I answered calmly. Her eyes filled. So that's it? You don't trust me at all anymore? I held her gaze. Trust isn't a default setting, Melissa. It's maintained. She swallowed hard. I made a mistake. No, I said gently. You made a series of choices. That distinction matters. A mistake is forgetting milk at the store. A choice is forging digital access. A mistake is snapping during an argument. A choice is leaving your mother on a dark road after quietly draining her savings. She looked down. I never thought it would go this far, she whispered. I leaned back slightly. That's the problem. You never thought. You assumed I would endure it. Absorb it. Excuse it. She wiped her eyes. Is there any way to fix this? There it was. The real question. Not money. Not the house. Relationship. And for the first time, I softened, not in weakness but in honesty. It won't be fixed quickly, I said. But it can be rebuilt slowly. She looked up. Hope flickered. But it will never look the way it did before. Because broken glass doesn't return to a single pane. It becomes something new. Different shape. Different strength. I'm starting therapy, she said quietly. For the debt. The pressure. The entitlement. She couldn't even say the word fully. That was new. Growth often begins with discomfort. I nodded once. That's a start. When we left the cafe, she hugged me hesitantly. I allowed it. But it was different now. Not automatic. Intentional. Boundaried. As I drove home, I realized something powerful. The road where she left me no longer haunted me. It defined me. Because that night forced a reckoning. Not just for her. For me. I stopped accepting small disrespect long before the big betrayal. I ignored red flags because I believed motherhood meant tolerance. It doesn't. It means guidance. Even when that guidance comes through consequences. And there was one final chapter left. Not about punishment. Not about money. But about the lesson. The one I needed her to understand fully. Because legacy isn't just what you leave behind. It's what you teach before you go. And I wasn't finished teaching yet. People think revenge is loud. They imagine screaming matches, slammed doors, dramatic final words. Mine was quiet, measured, legal, and complete. But the real ending of this story didn't happen in a courtroom, or at a mediation table, or even when the locks were changed. It happened the first night I slept alone in my house again. No tension in the hallway. No whispered arguments behind closed doors. No feeling like I needed permission to exist in my own space. Just silence. Peaceful silence. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, and I let myself go back to that road one last time. The cold air. The fading taillights. The sound of gravel under my slippers. I remembered how small I felt standing there. How my chest tightened with disbelief. How I questioned, for just a moment, whether maybe I deserved it for being too much, too forgetful, too old. That was the real damage. Not the abandonment. The doubt. But here's what that night actually did. It burned away illusion. It stripped away dependency. It revealed who my daughter had become. And who I still was. Strong. Capable. Clear. Melissa and Greg repaid the first installment on time. They signed every required document. Greg sold his car to cover part of the lump sum payment. Consequences change behavior quickly. Melissa continued therapy. She sends me updates sometimes, not for approval, but for accountability. Our relationship now is slower. Careful. There are no spare keys exchanged. No shared bank logins. No unspoken assumptions about inheritance. Just two adults rebuilding something fragile. And here's the truth no one talks about. Revenge didn't heal me. Boundaries did. Documentation did. Self-respect did. The night she left me on that dark American highway was meant to make me powerless. Instead, it reminded me exactly where my power lived. In the deed with my name on it. In the bank account only I controlled. In the pen I used to sign legal documents. In the calm voice that refused to beg. Most of all, in the moment I chose myself. I don't hate my daughter. Hate is heavy. I simply see her clearly now. And I see myself clearly too. If she ever forgets again, if she ever confuses kindness for weakness, she won't need a reminder. Because she already learned what happens when someone mistakes a grandmother for fragile. We may move slower. We may speak softer. But we built families. We survived loss. We managed homes. We buried husbands. We balanced budgets. We endured decades of life before our children ever thought they were strong. That night didn't break me. It refined me. And if there's one thing I hope you understand from my story, it's this. Never let anyone, not even your own blood, convince you that your age makes you disposable. Because sometimes, the woman left standing alone on a dark road is the very one who owns everything.